Hi, everybody. It's Emily from Beacon here. Thank you so much for signing up for trainings to be a visitor in our Powerful Together InReach this fall. This video is for the purpose of giving you a refresher about the note-taking and the listening side of your one-on-one conversations. And please first listen to Elizabeth's video about the concept of self-interest. So you have a guide with lots of questions, lots of ideas for getting that conversation flowing. And again, that purpose is really to learn as much as we can about what's important to people, what their values are, what's motivating them, and what's their stake in the work that we are here to do together around affordable housing and homelessness, because our vision is that all people have a home. And so these values conversations, these one-to-one listening sessions are really important for teaching us about what's on people's minds and what's going on in their lives. And so you're listening for self-interest, you're listening for their experiences, and we've provided a different form for you to actually record those things. So as you have your conversation, you will want to have this form handy. I'm going to share my screen. This is our form for one-to-one notes. There's some instructions at the top and a chance to capture their contact information, get their name correct, and add their congregation. At the end of the conversation you'll be asking for their consent to share any of that information with Beacon so that we can follow up with action alerts or newsletters to keep them informed about the work and invite them into future actions. So the meat of the one-on-one is really the conversation that focuses on self-interest, affordable housing, and their congregation. And so here are the places where you will want to jot down some notes. How does the visitee describe their self-interest? Remember, self-interest means motivation, passion, deepest concerns and hopes, and those values words that you might hear while people are talking. They might talk about equity, they might talk about inclusion, they might talk about fairness. Listen for those kinds of words as well, and you can add those to your notes. We'll give you an example in just a few moments. What do they understand to be their congregation's role in social justice? How is the visitee or their community affected by the affordable housing crisis or homelessness? Are they interested in working more closely with Beacon on housing or policy? And here's a spot for anything else that might have come up that you think is useful to share with the collaborative. Did you hear anything that was useful as Beacon plans for coming years? You might not have anything to add there, but you might. So here we have those consent questions. Would they mind if a member of our Beacon team follows up with them for opportunities to be involved this year? Yes or no? Would they like to receive Beacon's emailed newsletter? Yes or no? Would they like to receive policy action alerts? Yes or no? If they're already getting those, you can just mark yes. If during the conversation, your visitee shared a personal story that really illustrates the need for the work that we do together, this is a place where you can ask them if they would mind being followed up with in the future to share that again. They can say no, they can say yes, but we want to make sure that we're getting their consent if we're sharing those kinds of things outside of the one-on-one that you just had. And then please add any contact information that will help us get them the appropriate emails and communications that they have agreed to have. So you might be wondering, what do those answers look like? And then how do I get those back to Beacon? You might also be wondering why we're sharing that information with the Beacon organization. And I'll talk about that just a moment after we go through the JOT form. So I have Dylan here, one of our wonderful communications guys, who is going to share his screen and enter in some sample answers. I have invented a one-to-one conversation with a visitee named Cherie Stevens. And the comments that I've got here, this really is an invented person, but certainly a one-on-one that I can imagine that you might have. So on this first screen, And of course, the link is actually provided in your training materials, and it's on that same note-taking form if you want to just jot that in. All right, so the first screen is for your own information in your congregation, and you can go to the next one, Dylan. There's some information there about the instructions. You can go forward from there. Next. All right, our visitee's name is Shiree, S-H-I-R-E-E. Stevens. There you go. And the visitee's congregation is called Hope Fellowship. Thank you. Next. See how quick this is? We can all do it. All right, so this is the really cool thing about this jot form. It mirrors exactly what was on your note-taking form. So that first box, you know, each of these is open-ended. You can put as much or as little as you want there, and we'll be able to capture that. So how does the visitee describe their self-interest? We're not going to use the visitee's name in our notes, because as we store this data, we're actually keeping it separate from any contact information they shared for the purpose of receiving an email. So here's where I would say visitee is a business owner, homeowner, and lifelong resident of St. Louis Park. She's about 65 years old. She's worried the city is no longer affordable for people just starting out, young families, and for immigrants who are new to the community. Spelling doesn't have to be perfect. So then, Dylan, why don't you, I think you can enter and start a new line there. So these can also be just shorter phrases that you put in, that would be fine too. But the other thing I want to add is that she grew up in housing that was affordable due to the GI Bill. And that's spelled just GI Bill. She values investing in people starting out so they can be independent and build wealth. So that was the first part of that conversation, kind of matches the beginning of the question guide that you have. All right, so in that next box, I'd put anything about the conversation about their congregation, their own faith community. Hope Fellowship is just starting to become comfortable. Comfortable with taking action, like calling city council members. They're more involved in the food shelf and now stepping into upstream actions. They're concerned, here's another line down, very concerned with racial justice. And they're doing a lot of education about that. All right. How's the visitee or their community affected by the affordable housing crisis or homelessness? A couple things I would add here from that conversation that I am making up to myself. She notices more people asking for money by the freeway ramps, which they never used to see in her town. And in another line, the price of housing is going up too fast. As a senior, she can't downsize because senior apartments cost more than the big house she pays a mortgage on. All right, thank you. Dylan, you're doing great. All right, so in the next line, you can say any statements that they made about the opportunity to work with Beacon. You might be talking with someone who's really new to Beacon, but if they're open to being followed up with, this is a place where you can say that. So for Cherie, I would say she'd like to get more involved in Bring It Home, Minnesota. And here's a quote. So if you actually want to put exactly what somebody said, that's fine. Put a quotation mark. Just don't add their name. I don't feel like I know enough yet, but I'd like to be more confident calling my representatives. All right, thanks, Dylan. So as you can see, there's a couple more boxes where you can add other notes that you think are relevant that you want to pass on. And we'll click that next button. And this is where it's important to mark those consents. Okay, so Cherie said yes to being followed up with, yes to getting action alerts, yes to, this one here, did they share a personal story about experiencing housing instability? I asked Cherie if she'd be willing to share about that piece about her family affording housing because of the GI Bill. And she said, yes, that's actually a very powerful story about the importance of subsidizing housing so that people can get a good start as they are starting a family and trying to build wealth. So then we would put in contact information for Cherie. We're not going to do that right now. As you can see, those things are not required to be able to submit your notes. So if someone opted not to have that information put in, you can still submit the job form. We're not going to do that right now. Dylan, you can unshare that screen. Thanks again for all your good typing. The last thing I want to say, we get lots of questions about what Beacon will do with this information once the notes are shared back with our collaborative. So there's a couple of different reasons. One is that we are doing possibly 1,500 one-on-one conversations all over the metro, led by people just like you in our congregations, all in a short period of time. Imagine what you're going to learn about that person, about yourself, and imagine what you're going to learn about your congregation and what's affecting people's lives right there in your community at this point. Now imagine that we did all those one-on-ones and lost that information to know, if we did not keep track of these notes, we would not be benefiting from what people are trying to share about what's going on in their lives across our collaborative. So we would like to be able to see in aggregate what kinds of issues are coming up, what people are most motivated by, and what concerns about affordable housing they're having in their communities, as well as those things about self-interest that we've been talking about. When we store this data, their answers to questions will be kept separate from their names, contact information. So if we have put a record in our database to be able to follow up with them, the notes of the things they said in their visit are not actually going to that database with their contact information and their name. If you have any questions or if any visitees that you speak with would like to know more about that, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with them. Thank you so much for doing these one-on-ones, and thank you for sharing this information so that we can all learn how to be powerful together.